From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to The Hub. Hello there, I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Welcome to the program, Kamala or Donald. The 2024 U.S. presidential race is now in full swing following the Democratic National Convention on Tuesday night. According to the latest polls, Kamala Harris is now currently leading Donald Trump with strong support from young voters, women, and minorities, particularly black voters. But the race is still tight, especially in key battleground states like Arizona and Georgia. Despite her lead, Harris now faces some challenges as Republicans are generally more trusted on issues like the economy and crime. The U.S. economy is sending mixed signals. While inflation is easing and interest rate cuts are expected, there are still concerns about slowing growth. With both candidates having solid backing from their bases, high voter turnout is expected, which adds a layer of uncertainty to the election's outcome and its impact on the economy. Now, joining us today are Joseph Gregory Mahoney, Professor of Politics and International Relations at East China Normal University, live from Shanghai. We also have Brandon Andrews, entrepreneur and former Hill staffer in Washington, D.C., and Rick Dunham, former White House correspondent for Business Week and former president of the National Press Club, joining us from Silsbee, Texas. Brandon, let me go to you. What do you think is behind the surge in the polls for Harris?
Well, so many people were dissatisfied with the choices, given we had two octogenarians running for president, that we've seen this groundswell of support, this sigh of relief, I think, from the nation. And now with Harris's exuberance, with how quickly she became the presumptive Democratic nominee, and with her approach to campaigning, Donald Trump used to say that President Biden was running a campaign from a basement somewhere. Well, we've seen Kamala Harris all over the country over the past few weeks. Now, she still hasn't come out with some significant policy positions, so we'll see how the public reacts once those positions start coming out. But it's obvious that Americans were dissatisfied with the choices and are excited to have someone new in the race.
Running the presidential campaign from the basement, reminding me of Kevin Spacey in the House of Cards. But Rick, what do you think? Is Harris's popularity and current lead over Donald Trump temporary, or do you think they're here to stay?
Well, at this point, you have to say it's temporary, but the dynamic has changed significantly. It's temporary in that you really can't guarantee anything in American politics, and she hasn't really taken a punch yet, and there's always a chance that she could make a mistake. But in American politics, very rarely is there a change in dynamics after early September. I mean, a rare exception was 2016 with Donald Trump when he came from behind to win that election. So it is possible that she has changed the dynamic in a way that will be lasting. But the country is so evenly divided that I think it would be a mistake to say that this is permanent. I think that it's very close, and we have to look at whether this is just a bubble and it will burst, or if this is something that she can build on and increase her lead and build to a victory.
So Rick, there tend to be October surprises. Do you think this time around, given the withdrawal of Biden, given the scandals, the negative stories about Donald Trump that has already been run 8 years ago, there are still October surprises in store for both candidates?
I don't think you're going to have the kind of traditional October surprise that there's been in the past. But I do think what could happen, since this is a very short campaign, I mean, Joe Biden's withdrawal came later than any withdrawal of a major party candidate in American history. That what could happen is that something could break against her, and she would have a tough time going onto the defensive. that's where so I don't think it would be an October surprise like a big issue coming, but something that Trump did or some story, negative story in the media that took hold and changed the dynamic of the race. I think that's what she has to look out for. I think that's what could change. I don't think it would be a big story other than something huge happening in the Middle East or in Ukraine that would change the world.
Yeah, money matters, and in fact, money matters a lot in U.S. presidential cycles. Joseph, Kamala Harris has apparently raised a lot of money, about $500 million of them, since becoming the nominee and the candidate. What factors do you believe contributed to her ability to rally such widespread support and secure significant financial backing?
Well, as has already been noted, firstly, Biden's exit and her entrance certainly breathed new life and hope into the Democrats' campaign, and likewise energized donations. And second, while these developments and Harris's subsequent positive polling certainly fed this $500 million surge that we've seen over the past month, some of these funds had been earmarked for Biden, but fell to her, and some of them had been promised to Democrats, but suspended as Biden's chances collapsed. So the point here is that Harris has booked this money, and that's great for her campaign, but this outsized number might be an outlier. It might be inflated a bit by funds that were being temporarily held back. We'll have to see what the next monthly declaration shows to see whether her campaign can maintain this pace. But no doubt that will be driven by other factors like post-convention polling, a possible debate with Trump, and whether we do see her absorbing some hits that may knock her back.
The debate is scheduled in the weeks to follow, right? That can be a big thing, given how the debate between Trump and Biden played out on the outcome of the election. The course of the election,
I was looking back at the debates. Yeah, I was looking back at the debates, and if we look at Trump's debate record, he's really quite poor. And I don't say this as a partisan for either side. The only debate that he absolutely won was the one that Biden lost this year. In almost every debate prior to that, except for some of the Republican primary debates, he was not the winner. And he's generally only done passingly well in debates that were structured to really favor his style and set up to ask questions that fit his ideological bent. And Harris, by contrast, demonstrated, maybe not that she's an exceptional debater, but that she was above average when she was running against Biden 4 years ago, and certainly thereafter when she was debating as a vice presidential candidate. So I think the conventional wisdom holds here that she will likely fare well against Trump in a debate situation, and the real fight now is over the logistics and how that debate will be arranged so that those advantages that she might have won't be so obvious to voters.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. Brandon, how do you see campaign financing shaping the dynamics of this election? I mean, are there notable trends or concerns regarding the sources and the amounts of campaign donations that you think are worth noting and highlighting?
Well, both campaigns are going to be focused on the amount of what they'll call small dollar donations that they can get. So those are going to be the donations that can even be in the single digits when it comes to the dollar amount. There are campaigns, I've gotten text messages asking for $1, $2, $5. And the more of those small dollar donations, the more of those new voters, those new donations coming from people that haven't donated in the past, that to a campaign shows virality. That to a campaign shows, especially for a campaign that is so close when it comes to the makeup of the country, if you can move someone, if you can bring in new voters and get them to donate, get them to volunteer, move them up the ladder of action from sitting on the couch to actually voting, that can mean something big for your campaign. The other thing to think about here is the sheer amount of funding that the Harris-Walz campaign have now. They're even running ads on Fox News where Democrats wouldn't normally run ads because they have the funding to do it. And so if that funding continues, they'll be able to reach more voters. And it's been shown over and over again that that leads to more successful campaigns. Now, Trump has always been a pretty good fundraiser. And so don't expect his numbers to lag too far behind where Harris Walls have been after the summer and after things kind of even out. But Harris Walls are in a great place with funding. And again, they're running ads on Fox News, which you have to be in a really good place in terms of the money in the bank as a Democrat to do that.
Well, let's talk about young voters. Rick, Harris seems to be doing well with the young voters who are getting their information primarily via social media and digital media these days, with many social media influencers openly stated that they're supporting the Democrats and supporting Harris for that matter. Do you think the young voters are having a major impact on the outcome of this election?
I think the young voters are the biggest reason why there's change in the polls. One factor we've seen that's very important is that the Democratic Convention has credentialed these social media influencers along with regular reporters. The Democrats realize these social media influencers are as important, if not more important, than traditional journalists to have come to the convention and cover it. But the young voters had been sour on Biden. They had been tired of Biden. They were not enthusiastic about him. And that has changed the polling, and it's put states in play that were not in play. North Carolina, Arizona, that's one of the huge reasons why all of a sudden Harris is ahead in some polls in North Carolina. She's back in the game in Georgia and in Arizona. The biggest reason is young voters. The second biggest reason is black voters, especially in Georgia.
Joseph, do you see a disconnect here, as some do, because young voters, as enthusiastically expressing their political views as they do now, there tends to be a lower voter turnout when it comes to the first-time voters and young voters. Could there be a disconnect this time around?
Well, that's always a risk, but I think one of the things that we have seen is that when young voters are energized, as they were, for example, during the first Obama campaign, they can play a very decisive role. The bigger concern, of course, is that, there were a lot of disillusioned voters who were simply not going to come out for Biden. So whether or not we can count on young people to come out this time, we have seen this significant uptick in young people joining the Harris campaign as volunteers. We know that they tend to mobilize because they have more time, and they tend to support younger and more progressive candidates. At the same time, I think while the Dems did credential KOLs, and we have seen a large number of KOLs supporting Democrats, I don't think we should underestimate the power of conservative commentary, including some of the biggest influencers in the U.S. market. For example, people like Joe Rogan and others who seem to very clearly favor Trump. So, and to the extent of even promoting conspiracy theories at points. So certainly Harris has mobilized them. Whether or not they show up on election day remains to be seen, but they have played decisive roles in the past.
Yeah, Brendan, there's another issue that is the rise of AI and generative AI and deep fake and disinformation campaigns deriving from all these available technological tools. Are you concerned about that? How do you think AI-driven information or misinformation could play out in this electoral process?
Well, AI can have a big impact on the 2024 election up and down the ballot, from president all the way down to your local dog catcher. We've already seen deep fakes used. We've seen fake images of President Trump with voters of color used on social media. We've seen some older members of Congress use AI-generated photos to make themselves look younger during the primary season. So we've already seen it used now. To their credit, all of the frontier AI companies have said you cannot use AI in lobbying and political campaigns. They ban it. However, there's nothing that's stopping them in terms of the platform from actually creating it and putting out there. They're just saying once it's out there, we're going to ban you. We're going to take steps, whatever necessary steps we can, to prevent you from doing it again. But AI can have a big impact. I think it's going to have a bigger impact down ballot. So as we look at some of these state races and local races where there aren't as many resources for enforcement, where maybe people aren't paying as close of attention, some of these deep fakes, some of these AI pieces can be used. But we've already seen, we saw Elon Musk release a video of Kamala Harris on his X page, and it was completely fake, but people took it. Some people probably as real, other people took it as a joke, but AI can have a big impact, and it's something that we certainly need to monitor. Again, all of the companies have said don't use it, but that's not stopping bad actors just yet.
Yeah, that is a concern. Brendan, let me stay with you and talk about race and votes along the racial lines. Do you think Kamala Harris, being one of the very few black candidates, although has Indian heritages, as well, can secure the black base as strongly as candidate Obama once did in the 2007-2008 election cycles?
Well, any candidate for president reinventing or replicating what President Obama has done is a really tall task. So maybe not when it comes
like
to putting together.
93% of black voters in 2007, as far as I remember.
That's a very tall task, even for a Democrat. However, she can, I think, reimagine that coalition and put it together in a different way. There's been a lot of news stories about members of the black community perhaps being disaffected, voting for Democrats year after year, and maybe not seeing the change in their communities that they would like to see, and so looking for other options. I think for many, Trump and the Republicans aren't going to be a viable option, but that means that some people might stay home. And so I think the big question is, now that you have Kamala Harris, now that this is a special moment for the black community, for the South Asian community, for women across the nation, now that we've gotten them excited and up off the couch, how do we actually get them to the polls to vote? That's the question that Kamala Harris and her campaign are going to have to answer. So again, do I think that they can get to that 92% that President Barack Obama had during his first campaign? I think that may be too high of a bar to expect. However, I think they can certainly get the majorities in communities of color needed to be able to put together that coalition and win some of these battleground states like Georgia, like Pennsylvania, to be able to push them over the top. If they can do that, they can certainly be on a path to victory from the Democratic side.
Very insightful indeed. And Rick, let me turn to you and talk about gender. Because if you look at the 2016 elections between Hillary and Donald Trump, there was a major gender split, if not a gender war. You know, I covered the Hillary base on the election nights from her New York headquarters, and it was quite an experience over there. You see how much women supporting Hillary Clinton versus how much the percentage of men, which is very high, supporting Donald Trump. Are we going to see a similar scenario playing out this time?
Definitely. If you remember that night, and I remember it too, I was doing an all-night election watch, and the gender gap is even larger this year. And it's larger. One of the reasons it's larger this year is that Black and Hispanic men are more likely to favor Republicans. Black women in one recent poll, 3% supported Trump. Black men, 22% supported Trump. There is a big gap among Black and Hispanic men and women. And so the gender gap has opened among minorities that wasn't there in 2016. Also, in the suburbs, the gap has widened. And in blue-collar rural America, like where I am right now in rural Texas, women are much more likely than rural white men to vote for a Democrat. And so I do believe, the polling is showing it, and I think the abortion issue is one of the issues that's driving it. Generally, the freedom of women to control decisions that are related to their body and their lives. And I think that the Supreme Court decisions in recent years have just amplified the divisions that were there in 2016.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll see what happens this time around. Joseph, talking about the battleground states, the U.S. elections, given the design, the layout, and the constitutional design, it's really coming down to the few battleground states, as you know this better than most people. So, according to the polls, in the key battleground states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Harris now leads in 6 of these 7 battleground states. Do you think this will last? What's behind this?
Well, I think what we see in these states is that voters want change, a revolution of sorts. And despite the fact that many voters are led by identity or even single issue advocacy, many workers don't seem ideologically committed to one party or the other. Now, when Trump ran against Hillary Clinton and indeed ran against even the Republican Party itself in 2016, he positioned himself as an outsider who beckoned change. And a lot of people were vulnerable to that messaging, especially workers in swing states, because they have experienced declining fortunes since the 1980s, at least. They're well aware at the micro level of the overall declines the U.S. has experienced at the macro level. And of course, they found Trump's populism appealing, even if some cynically believed he'd merely break the system and force real change, whether he was capable of leading or constructing this change or not. Now, this trend is not a new one. We saw it established in the wake of the global financial crisis in 2008. It's what contributed significantly to Obama's win, the message of hope, and it's what fueled Biden over Trump 4 years ago, in so much as Biden was seen as a viable alternative to the disappointments associated with the Trump presidency. Now, this trend was at risk this year when Biden was still in the race, with Trump having a slight advantage of presenting himself as a relative outsider. And while Harris is not an outsider, she is a relative unknown, and many voters, I think, are willing to bet on what they haven't seen in lieu of getting more of what they have seen. So they want change. They want real change. And because they don't know much about Harris, I think many are willing to imagine the possibilities and to hope for that change.
Yeah, one message Trump is trying to nail home hammer home is the message that you've got to be strong on China, you've got to be tough on China because China steals all those jobs in a wake up of globalization. And I'm here to help you guys in the Rust Belt areas, helping the tire jobs back, the factory jobs back, the blue collar workers. We got you covered. But do you think this is what happens on the ground? Do you think those Rust Belt workers are somewhat disillusioned with Trump's trade war and technology war on China, or are they pretty much okay with that?
Well, I don't think we've seen a shift in sentiments with regard to China. I think the idea there is still relatively negative in many areas, and I think the Biden policies where we saw a return to large trade imbalances is something that Harris may be forced to answer for in a debate or in some negative messaging that we might see from Trump. But again, I think the real question is whether or not either candidate is capable of promising real change. And I don't think they saw real change under Trump. In fact, they saw a catastrophic collapse related to the failed COVID policies. So the question of whether or not Trump can deliver that change, having not delivered it in the past, versus the still unknown possibility that Harris might be able to produce it, is probably compelling to some.
Brendan, what do you think when it comes to Washington's policy vis-a-vis China? Is it going to be same old, regardless of who wins the election, Harris or Trump?
I think there will be some consistency. Both campaigns, Biden, during his time in office, and former President Trump have talked about tariffs. Now, the problem is tariffs are inflationary. And so if you are Vice President Harris and running for president and you want to show people that you care about affordability, if you introduce a tariff or continue a Biden-era tariff that remains inflationary, and when you put a tariff on something like electric vehicles, it not only affects the actual vehicle, it affects the vehicle components. When you do that, it runs counter to the broader goal of making things more affordable. Do I think from a direct bilateral relationship standpoint that there could be some improvements with Harris? I think that she'll try to extend the hand and build the relationship in a different way. But when it comes to some of the economic policy, we're probably going to see some consistency.
All right, Rick, the economy matters. Recently, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan raised the odds of a recession before the end of 2024 to somewhere between 20 to 35%. How might this economic outlook shape U.S. politics leading up to the November voting?
Well, first, as the co-director of the Global Business Journalism program at Tsinghua University, I would respectfully disagree with Goldman Sachs. There's been projections of coming recession for a long time, and one of these years they're going to be right. But we've been hearing the sky is falling for probably the past year and a half, and recession hasn't come. But as someone who covered politics for so many years in the United States, it's what people feel about the future of the economy that's most important. People felt terrible about the economy about 6 months ago, and they felt terrible about inflation, and it was hurting Joe Biden tremendously. But most of the economic statistics have been better, and the feeling is much more nuanced and much more mixed now. And I think we have to really wait another month or two to see, and to see how people are feeling. Right now, I don't think it's the killer issue. The Republican ads on inflation, when I saw a list of the ads that are running, and Republicans have cut down on the ads on inflation. It's now a very small percentage of the ads that they're running. They're running many more about immigration and the border. I don't think the economy is working for Republicans as an issue. So I think it's going to be much less important than it would have been 6 months ago.
Joseph, do you agree? How much of an issue will the economy be, and what is the state of the U.S. economy now, from your understanding?
Well, I agree. I agree with my colleague. I think that it is much more nuanced, and I don't think 20 to 35% chance of a recession is something that has a lot of people quaking in their boots in Washington. Nevertheless, we may see an interest rate cut. We may, I likely see one, but the Fed has been somewhat conservative. So I think that it's always an issue, but we seem to be sort of in a sort of relatively stable position, and will likely remain one for the next month or so, in ways that would be perceptible to voters.
Yeah, very quickly, talking about rate cuts, analysts are predicting that the Federal Reserve may need to cut interest rates again soon to prevent a recession. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, again, I think what we've seen is that the Fed has been very, very proactive in raising rates to avoid problems and creating problems as a result, and even slower to reduce them. So I think part of it has to do with what is happening in Beijing. There was we saw Beijing lower some key rates after Yellen's most recent visit, right ahead of the third plenum. So this isn't strictly a matter of what's happening in the U.S. economy. It's also a global economic situation. So there could be various reasons why we may see a federal rate cut in the next month or so. But I doubt very seriously that it would have much to do with the election, in so much as the Fed is insulated politically.
Joseph, Rick, and Brendan, thank you all so very much for joining us at this hour. Thank you. And that will do it for this edition of The Hub on CGTN. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. Thank you so much for tuning in. Our news coverage continues on CGTN. Bye and take care.